that this spat could weigh on the auto sector for years to come.
Absolutely. The strike is an unfortunate waste of time and money. And, I've been following the auto sector as a sell-side analyst for almost 40 years. And it has become increasingly difficult to get investors' attention with the stocks, especially General Motors and Ford. We got a good break coming out of the downturn, reduced cost structures, but this is a major step backwards.
In other words, you think we're going to lose the next generation of investors in companies like General Motors and Ford, if they're not already gone because they're in the Teslas and, Ubers of the world?
Well, I don't think Tesla and Uber are necessarily threats to General Motors or Ford, but the question is what's going to get a portfolio manager to buy General Motors or Ford if you have risks increasing, like labor risk? I think many people thought labor risk had kind of been subdued since the downturn. Now it's back on the table that labor could be a real risk for this group as you go forward.
It's still only been, I say only 26 days. If this is resolved shortly, then perhaps it could quickly become a distant memory, right?
Absolutely. I think you need to get it resolved. Both sides. To me, it's just a breakdown of communication. And in 2017, when the union rep went off the GM board because of being investigated for some of these issues, I think communication broke down at General Motors, between General Motors and the union, and I think that needs to get resolved. That being said, if they get this thing resolved over the next day or two and they start up production a week from now, you will be in a position to build inventory and you'll see finances recover and cash recover.
At the same time, there are some other analysts out there, Michael, who believe that what has gone on with the strike will impact GM's ability to meet its cost savings targets through 2020, will actually cost the automaker possibly up to $1.5 billion. What are your estimates? Because, distant memory, great, but if the distant memory hits 2020 projections, then maybe it's not so distant.
Well, I think if you look at it, U.S. labor costs are about $5 billion at General Motors. So if you go up 5% a year for the next 3 to 4 years, you're talking about, $500 million, $700 million of additional cost. That doesn't really completely disrupt their profit projections. So I would say that's a little bit too aggressive.
What about the auto suppliers? How are they being affected both economically and in the market by this?
I think it's had a bigger impact on the suppliers than it has General Motors, quite frankly. I think you're seeing the suppliers, they're getting strangled because, they're smaller and they depend on GM on a lot of these products that are being shut down. And so I think the near-term impact on the suppliers is probably hitting them a little bit harder. Every supplier, I cover 8 suppliers. Each of the 8 have significant impact on third quarter, and that impact has accelerated in October when some of the operations in Canada and Mexico have gone down.
We're looking at a lot of those stocks right now, some of which I know you do cover, and they are all up, some of them markedly today, in admittedly an up market. Is it just the rising boat lifting all tides, or what? Or is it?
I think it's China.
You think it's China?
China.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's not that they are anticipating a solution, a resolution of the strike.
I don't think so. Normally the suppliers, when there is a strike impact, the market kind of looks beside it and they'll look through it. And, particularly just take a stock like Lear. Lear is a big supplier to General Motors. They're also a supplier to the Ford Explorer, which is having production issues. I think as you go through the quarter, and let's just say Lear has an impact of 70 cents from the GM strike. As you go out over the next 2 to 3 months, GM's going to need to rebuild inventory, and they'll be accelerating production of some of those key models for Lear.
You still have a buy on GM?
I do have a buy on GM, and certainly you have to think about how this strike is settled and what the cost implications are and everything else, and the implications for General Motors and their perception, more importantly, as you go out over the next 5 to 10 years and that relationship with the UAW.